I've really been looking forward to having this conversation here on GCR. I'm not trying to age him, but growing up, he was one of my absolute favorite players to watch. He not only was an outstanding, one of the greatest receivers in Maryland history, then became a great pro receiver, obviously a legendary career in the CFL, but he has returned to the University of Maryland in the title of Executive Director of Revenue Share Management and General Manager. I'm looking forward to finding out more about the new job for the great Geroy Simon, who is with us now here on GCR. Geroy, it's Glenn in Baltimore. It's so great to catch up with you, man. Thank you for taking the time for us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Geroy,
Um,
I,
it's been great. It's been great to be back.
I can only imagine what that means to you. I hope you're not like when I say that I was a kid when I was watching. I hope that doesn't like sting. I hope
No,
that it's all right.
no, it's all good. It's all good. I understand where I'm in life, and there's a lot of people that watched me a long time ago, and I'm thankful for everyone that did.
Dude, before we get into the job itself, what you just mentioned just about being back at Maryland, can you describe what it's meant to you to be back in a significant role, a very significant role, but to really be home?
Yeah, it means a lot. This is a place where I essentially spread my wings and learned the business of athletics and really got a taste of playing on a big stage and seeing the world for how big it is. Um, to when I left here, I wasn't sure of quite what was going to happen. I bounced around the NFL. I moved to Canada and spent a significant amount of time there. But it's funny, I had a great career out there, but um, all the years that I was on the West Coast, I was always looking back to the East Coast to have an opportunity to come back. And when this opportunity came, I jumped at it, without hesitation, just because, again, this is a place that I feel is essentially my second home, a place that I have fond memories of, and a place that I love. So having the opportunity um, to help Maryland athletics and the University of Maryland. Um, in having a small part in helping build the athletics programs is something that's really important to me.
Can I ask this question just because it's been so long since I chatted with you? I'm not sure I remember what was the story originally and how you ended up at Maryland from a part of the world where I feel like a lot of people would have ended up at Penn State. What was the story originally and why it was Maryland for you?
Well, Maryland was one of the first schools that really recruited me. One of the first major schools that recruited me, and it was really intriguing for me because, one, they ran a run and shoot at that time, and that's the offense that I played in high school, and then, you know, it's the number one school in the country for criminal justice. Which, if I wasn't going to be a professional athlete, I wanted to go into
Wow.
law enforcement or the Secret Service. So, and then the weather was perfect. So it,
Yeah, yeah,
those.
yeah. Nice, beautiful days on the beach, right?
Well, it's better than the weather here is better than being in Pennsylvania where it's snowing and cold all the time. You only have to wear a winter coat for about 2 months out of the year as opposed to 6 months
Fair,
in Pennsylvania,
fair.
and it's only a 3 hour drive. So it was a perfect setting for me. And when I got on campus, I fell in love with campus and knew that this is the place that I wanted to be at.
Of course, under the great Mark Duffner, that run and shoot offense. Giro, I have no doubt that this is the question that you've gotten most since you've taken this job. So I'll just be the next one to ask it to you. What is this job? Because I think everybody starts to have a little bit of an understanding
Mhm.
of this new era of college athletics, but it's maybe more complicated than when someone says they're the general manager of the football team. This feels like it's a lot bigger than just that. Can you draw into us and maybe are there still elements of this job that you're figuring out as you go?
Yeah, so I just had a meeting with women's basketball, and that's a part of the athletics that I being an athlete, you understand basketball, but when you have to get down into the nitty gritty of the analytics of basketball and things like that, that's where you have to rely on people on your staff and people that work in that world to help you. So essentially, my job is director of revenue share, revenue share management, and that's revenue share is going to kick in July 1st, where essentially a portion of the university's revenue that we bring in will be sharing with college our athletes here, and essentially I'll be negotiating contracts,
Okay.
and then managing salary caps for each sport. Whether football, basketball, women's basketball, and then the Olympic sports. So essentially, I'm in charge of the money and making sure that the dollars are spent efficiently and in the proper way.
He's Geory Simon. He's with us here on GCR. Geroy, is that are you also involved? I know, like the role of a general manager, the role that you had. You're also, of course, identifying that talent. Are you
Mhm.
involved with that part of it, or is it more the coaches come to you? These are the athletes that we're interested in. Can you now work on making that happen? What's the line between those two things?
Yeah, so I work closely with the head coaches and directors of player personnel on each sport, and just being a football guy, I'll gravitate to more of the player personnel and,
Okay.
and and that side of it. But I'm not going to go and tell Kevin, Coach Willard that, hey, there's a point guard I saw, you should sign him, or you should look at him and we should sign him. It's more of them explaining to me what they want in a player and how they want to build their roster. And then they identify that player, and then I help execute the contract and getting them to Maryland. So with the basketball side of it, it's more them telling me what they want, and then same thing with Coach Loxley on the football side. But with me being a former general manager in the professional ranks, I have experience in building a roster.
Sure.
So, Coach Locks, he trusts me to give input and have somewhat of an opinion on a player and their values.
I feel like that's been a bigger topic in this era of college athletics. That like it was difficult enough to try to be a head coach.
Yeah.
Now, when you add on this, like, does there need to be like a full on? I don't want to say separation because the coaches still are going to want their players, but does it require for these levels there being additional help in terms of scouting and identifying and roster building beyond just the negotiation of contracts?
Yeah, so I think the way that college athletics is going, there's going to go, it's going to mimic more of a pro model,
Yeah,
where the head coaches will be involved. Sometimes the coordinators will be involved, but you have a full-on personnel staff that identifies talent, recruits the talent, and then the coach makes the final decision on who's a take and who's not a take, and then who you're going to keep on the roster, and who you're going to move on from. But I think it's such a big job now that some of those responsibilities have to be delegated to members of your staff. If you don't have that, you have to build that out.
sure. I don't know if this is. I know the number in in the agreement and the house and the settlement was 20 up. I think it was up to $20 million. Is that correct?
20.5.
$20.5 million. Is that is that across the like? Is Maryland at that number? Does each school have the choice of how far they go on that number? What does that actually look like tangibly?
So once the house settlement is decided in April, the specific number will be defined.
Okay.
But we're thinking it's $20.5 million, and we're, as a university, we're opting in to share that with our athletes. Um, but yeah, it's and then you divide it based on the division will be divided based on your school and what your thoughts are for each sport.
And I guess is that is it going to be a hard? And not even that I don't you would even know what the number would be. Would it be a hard number per sport, or would that be a we can move that around based on
Mhm.
what maybe the athlete was that you were looking for each sport? What does that kind of look like?
I think I think the thought is that there's going to be a hard cap,
Okay.
um, overall. But I think once you declare what your number is per sport, I think you're going to have to stick to that, and that's how I'm operating.
Okay.
Is once we decide, what the number is for each specific sport, that's the number we're sticking to, and we're gonna essentially treat that as a hard cap.
Does this allow for Maryland to be more? I know you can't talk about specific recruits. I understand that. Does it allow for Maryland to be more competitive, particularly in a football standpoint, right? For maybe athletes that in the past wouldn't have considered Maryland because there won't be a significant gap that like Maryland presumably can offer exactly as much as anybody else could offer around the country.
Yeah, the thinking is, in the past, teams had an exorbitant amount of money that they can just spread around and you just can't compete at different schools. But now this brings the floor up and then, your ceiling might not be as high, but the gap isn't as big as it has been in the past. So yes, I think this will level out the playing field as far as what you're able to offer each student athlete, but then it just keeps things kind of in order where you don't have as much of a competitive advantage as when it comes to dollars and cents.
We're chatting with Geroy Simon, who's back at the University of Maryland here on GCR. Geroy, I think to that point, like NIL doesn't go away. Like this is in addition, as you talk about what other schools would have. Like they still can offer NIL money on top of the revenue share, correct?
Yeah, but the NIL will be scrutinized through a third party.
Okay.
So there's going to be even rules and regulations based on that, based on what a player's value actually is, as opposed to giving a backup quarterback $1 million. Um, you know, there'll be scrutiny placed on that.
You are probably the perfect person to ask this question to because I'm sure you've heard all of the belly aching for the last few years of the people that have said, "Oh, this is ruining college athletics," which and that chuckle is exactly what I knew I would get, and it's obviously different. We all know that, right? Like we're very aware, and there are fewer stories of 4-year guys, and for those of us that are of a certain age, that's a bummer. Although, like this Juju Reese has been an amazing story for
Right.
Maryland this year. But when you hear that, what is your response to someone who says this is ruining college athletics or this thing that I have loved?
I don't think it's ruining it at all. I think it's giving athletes the opportunity to make dollars that they that everybody thought they should be making in the past, as opposed to the brown paper bags that have been going on for
Right.
hundreds of or years and
No.
years.
No,
Um,
you
you
think there were people that were violating I don't believe you, G. Simon. That
this
wasn't happening.
this regulates that and gives the university an opportunity to share the revenues that the players help generate and give them an opportunity to make money along with being a student athlete. So um, I don't think this is ruining college athletics at all. I think this is enhancing it because now a player doesn't have to try to run off to the next school because they were promised a certain amount of money. They can, and that will always happen. Players
Right.
will move just because they see dollar signs, but you'll get the true players and athletes that want to stay in school and not chase the professional ranks because they're making money and able to to set themselves up for the future.
I asked this though to ask like obviously one of the things you said is negotiating contracts and I feel like people have that's been the thought of hey what does that look like moving forward? Are there multi-year deals that limit like someone from transferring? What will these contracts look like, and can it be something that maybe helps keep players at one school for a certain amount of time moving forward?
I think with the transfer portal, you can always sign multi-year deals, and when you have a young player coming into your program, you expect them to stay for the foreseeable future and finish their careers at the university. But you also have to be realistic and know that um, players have the ability to move, and although you don't want it to happen, you should always plan accordingly. So yes, there will be multi-year deals, but that doesn't really matter because a player has the right to transfer.
Okay.
Especially in football, there's two transfer windows where they can go into the portal and move. So you're planning for them to stay, but you shouldn't be surprised if they
So
hit the portal and
so
move.
that's interesting. 'Cause like some people would compare this to say, like an NFL contract where well you've got a contract, you've got to play. These are really more like a series of 1 year deals, essentially. These
Exactly.
contracts that you're giving
Exactly.
out.
Yeah.
Is there?
Yeah.
Do you know if there's any thought to try to change that moving forward? Is to try to make them like true multi-year contracts at some point?
Well, again, I mean, you can sign a multi-year contract, but again, if they move, but in the end, this is a year-to-year thing right
Yeah,
now, and
yeah.
that's just for me. That's how I'm going to operate, and that's essentially what I coming from the Canadian Football League. We did have multi-year deals, but then we also had one-year deals. So once you bring a player on campus and have them committed, you immediately start the process of re-recruiting them to retain their services.
Do you get the sense that this puts a greater emphasis than to your point on the portal that like that the deals maybe for the knowns become more significant than the deals for the unknowns? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, but at the same time, you have to have knowledge and experience on both sides of it. So yes, you do want to live in that portal world because that gives you a little bit of certainty on a player.
Right.
But in building the core of your team, you want you want to bring in some young talent and then develop that talent at the same time. So it's a mixed bag of each situation.
Before we let you go, is some of this like the excitement of it? Obviously, the Maryland part of it is a big deal for you, and I understand that. But in choosing to do this, you're an icon in Canadian football, right? Like your life could be good there for forever.
Yeah.
Is some of this the excitement of figuring this out and entering to this sort of like brand new world here in college
Yeah.
athletics?
Well, yeah, the thing with me is I'm a risk taker. I'm a builder. I'm a guy who I'm willing to walk in the unknown and understand that the qualities that brought me to this point are going to be the same qualities that helped me to be successful. So this is a new world, and it's new. It's exciting, but there's a lot of unknowns, and for me, I want to be on the front end of that and help shape the direction of how we build this thing and how we operate as an institution. So coming back home, yes, it's great that it's Maryland, but it's also great that it's a new experience, and I have an opportunity to help build and shape the way we operate as a university.
And then I'll wrap with the really dumb guy question. You said July 1st is when everything goes into play, correct?
Yeah, that's when revenue share actually
So
starts.
you're, and I know this is, I'm just, you couldn't like today go try to approach, say, Derek Queen, right, and say, hey, do you really love the NBA? Because we're gonna have this money to throw. Is that even an option, or are you not even allowed to talk to anybody until after July
No,
1st?
yeah, I mean, conversations happen. You have to be prepared and you
Okay.
have to plan and you have to have an understanding of what you're looking at in the next, not only week, but the next 6 months. So those conversations are happening for
Okay.
sure. And that's where I said when you bring a guy on campus or a female on campus, you have to start, once they're committed, you have to start re-recruiting them
Yeah.
and to make sure you know what's going to happen in the future.
But can Maryland compete with NBA money? Is that? Yeah, I mean, I know it's good money, but is it that good money that it can compete?
NBA money is in another stratosphere.
Yeah, it's tough. That's tough. Enjoy it while it's going on, and maybe go win a national championship in the process. Is
Exactly.
is the way we feel. Geroy, this is really fascinating stuff, man. I'm so glad that it's you. It's so cool for everybody that cares and has cared about Maryland football for a long time that you're the one doing it. I would love to have more of these conversations if you'd be up for it as this goes along, as we learn more about how everything plays out. Really appreciate you taking the time for us this morning,
For
man.
sure, anytime. I thank you for having me on, and look forward to more conversations.